there was a lot of regret in sort of like the way I exited the industry a little bit at that time and leaving my agent manager. I did have some regret for many years, and it was like, whatever, just trying to like almost like claw back in. And I don't know, maybe I made a mistake, and then like, you kind of fizzle and do this thing, and then everything has led me to where I am now, and where I am right now is my favorite place I've ever been in my life.
I believe you had to re-find your footing when you were in your 30s. Can we talk about what happened and what does re-finding it mean?
Yeah, I love it. Refinding my footing in my 30s. That's almost like a good name for like a book or something.
Yeah, there we go. By
Finding
Joe
my
Burke.
footing in my 30s. Yeah, it's like got a nice ring to it. I think, I started making movies when I was 8 years old in the backyard. My family had a camcorder. I fell in love with making movies. I remember the first short we made was on Thanksgiving. My uncle, my grandpa, my brother were all at the house on Thanksgiving, and we make a short film. And I was like, oh my God, this is something I want to do forever. And that was it. And it just kept going. And my whole life was dedicated to acting and making movies through high school, through college, through grad school, all the way up until basically my 30s. And, getting into the professional industry in my mid-20s. And I think I got a little burnt out, like we talked about, and I just needed to take a step back and basically recalculate what is actually going on here. How do I want to live my one life that we get? And I don't want to feel so desperate and so kind of avoiding life and living for this one goal and putting everything else aside. Like I was saying earlier, it's like, this is it. So like I have to find a balance. And also I'm getting too caught up. I was getting personally too caught up in the industry, which, the word toxic is thrown around a lot for all stuff. Maybe it's toxic, whatever. It's just like the Hollywood industry, the show business, right? The whole, it's not show friends, it's show business. It is. It's a business, and it's like, that's it. And so, anyways, long story short, I paused. I kind of, a few different things happened. I kind of fell in love for the first time, got my heart broken. I left my agent and manager. I was this, I was that, and I was like, time out, okay. I just want to go back to where I think I belong, which is in film school, which I love so much, and I just want to get back to just the craft of storytelling. And so I called up NYFA and introduced myself, like I was saying, and they said yes. I got hired to teach here, and it was sort of teaching here and getting back into the classroom and getting back into the purity of what storytelling is and what movie making is all about. That kind of slowly started getting me back on my feet. I will say, and I said this to a friend recently jokingly, my first year of teaching was an interesting year. I would sit in the classroom and just be like, you don't know how hard it is in Hollywood, and I would give these whole like emotional rants where I'm tearing up and talking about the industry, and like, one student's like, are we going to learn about directing? I'm like, you don't want to know, you don't know what it's like out there. I needed to relax a little bit and figure it out. But I love teaching. I've been doing it for 11 years now. I've definitely found my way with it, and I love it. But yeah, it's sort of like you're taking a leap of faith of just being like, I'm going to just like shift things up, and I've done this a few times in my life, and I'll talk about this because I think this is interesting. And I was actually, again, saying to another friend recently where it's like, every time I kind of like do something that's sort of like a big pivot in my life, good things come from that. And it's sort of like, again, there's a lot of regret in sort of like the way I exited the industry a little bit at that time and leaving my agent manager. I did have some regret for many years, and it was like, whatever, just trying to like almost like claw back in. And I don't know, maybe I made a mistake, and then like, you kind of fizzle and do this thing. And then everything has led me to where I am now. And where I am right now is my favorite place I've ever been in my life, which is making movies I care about, independent films, making this movie Burt, frankly, that we'll talk about. Like everything has led me on this journey to this moment. And like, I have erased all the regret that I've carried in my 30s because I finally kind of hit this goal of making this movie that I'm so passionate about. And my goal has always been to make something that make a movie that just, sings to me, sings to the audience. And I feel like we finally made something special here with this little movie. And, before I made this movie, I want to talk about one more pivot. Like pivoting from the industry and going to teach film school and kind of shaking up my life in that way and kind of just trusting that this will eventually be the right path for me and work out and I'll figure it out. A few years ago, so I had that going, and I was living in Studio City, and I had a great apartment of my own, and I was living there for 8 years. And in my late 30s, my sister, who was living with my dad, who has Parkinson's disease, he moved out here from Ohio during early COVID. He retired from Ohio, moved out here. My sister was helping him out. She goes to Phoenix with her boyfriend. My dad's like, hey, if you want to come live here in West LA with me and help me out and like save some money and focus on making your next movie, you're welcome to come stay here. And I said, no, Dad, I'm not going to come. I'm 38 years old. I'm not going to live with my dad again and get rid of all my stuff in my apartment. That's crazy. And then 2 weeks later, I did that. I sold all my furniture and got rid of this cool place, and everyone's like, what are you doing? All my friends were like, kind of like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm gonna do something crazy here. I'm gonna shake it up. And so I sold all my vintage furniture and moved out of this place I lived for 8 years and went to live with my dad, and I'm living with my dad now and helping him out. It was actually kind of a really special time to kind of, you don't necessarily move back in with your parents necessarily at that age. So it was kind of cool to even just be living with him again and helping him out. And it was in that time of living with him and helping him out. He has Parkinson's, where I made this movie, Burt. We actually shot at that time a father-son story that revolves around Parkinson's. So it was sort of this parallel thing going on. And it's those signs that kind of come at you where you're just like, oh my God, this feels like, I feel like I'm actually on the right path here. Even though it looks crazy to other people, maybe looking from the outside or they're not quite understanding, I care less about that. And I've always cared, how people, if they don't understand yet, they don't understand yet. That's fine. And no problem. It's all good. But if I feel like I'm if I feel like I'm on the right path, if I'm really feeling like I'm doing this the right way, then I have this feeling inside of me that is like this little fire that's building up and getting that feeling of getting back on your feet, like you're asking. And so I did start to kind of like, okay, no, this is where I belong. This is it. This is it. This is the move. You get stale. I will say this also to people listening. You sit in one place for too long and you're getting stale and you realize, oh man, I'm just feeling uninspired. And I also was thinking, I could live in this apartment for the rest of my life. I was thinking about this green couch I have in my place. I'm like, God, when I move to my next apartment, like, where's this couch gonna go? Like, I was like having thoughts. I was like, why am I even thinking about where this green couch is gonna go in the future? Like, this is not, no. Sold the green couch, sold it all. Let's keep going. So that was sort of getting back on my feet and just feeling like it all led to this movie Burt, which I do feel like for me is just sort of like a peak moment of my life and career and everything I've ever wanted to do with filmmaking. And because I finally feel like I hit this moment with this beautiful special film that we can talk about, I'm like, okay, clearly this path was the path for me, and the regret sort of goes away, and here we are. We'll see where we go from here.
Has a movie ever broken your heart? You said you had your heart broken, but by a movie, as a film, ever sort of dashed your hopes, jaded you?
A movie I've seen or a movie I was a part of?
Part of, or maybe one that you had hoped to make personally?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, so again, part of this whole leaving the industry in my late 20s, early 30s, sort of thing we're talking about here, it was sort of in that process, a lot of these feelings and stuff that was going on in my life. And I'm not faulting the project. It was just sort of like, I was on that project dedicating so much while dealing with this heartbreak and this, and it just sort of ate me up inside. And I came out the other side being like, it was a long process. It was like a couple years of it was a long process to get this movie to the finish line, which I was a big part of. And anyways, I just came out of this side. I was like, that process is not a process I want to go through again, and for many reasons and personal reasons. And the way it just sort of hit me so hard. So that particular project probably was a good turning point.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.